Hello and welcome to today's topic. So today we're going to be talking about chemical properties of matter. So now we've already talked about physical properties of matter. Remember, we talked about color and shape and malleability and ductility, all those things that do not change the substance. Okay, so now we're going to talk about chemical properties, and these are things that actually do change the substance. So one would be flammability. Most of you know what that means. Toxicity, again, like a poison. Corrosiveness, that would be another one. So let's just go ahead and let's get to a definition. So by definition, chemical property is a characteristic or a behavior of a substance that may be observed when it undergoes a chemical change or a chemical reaction. We'll talk more about that in later videos. So chemical properties are either seen during or following a reaction, since the arrangement of the atoms within a sample must be disrupted for the property to be investigated. This is different from physical properties, which is characteristics that may be observed or measured without changing the identity of the specimen. So again, when we're talking about chemical properties, we're talking about properties that are going to be observed within a chemical reaction. So here's your key takeaway points. One, a chemical property is a characteristic of a substance that may be observed when it participates in a chemical reaction. And these are not, I don't know if these are all in your notes, so you may have to write these down. Examples of a chemical property will include flammability, toxicity, chemical stability, and heat of combustion. And we're going to add some more to that list in just a minute. Chemical properties are used to establish a chemical classification or are used in labels on containers and storage areas. So if you go back to one of the bottles, so I'll probably try to show you in class, it's going to tell you on the back of it what the chemical properties are, so we know what it can be harmful, what it can be used for, and so forth. It'll say things like keep away from flame. It'll say that it could be corrosive. It could be that it could be irritant to the skin, all those kind of things that are chemical properties. So here's some examples. And I would jot these down. Again, toxicity, reactivity, the type of bond that it forms. We'll talk about covalent and ionic and metallic bonds. Coordination number, that's not usually one that we talk about in here. Oxidation state, definitely we'll talk about oxidation numbers. Flammability, heat of combustion, enthalpy of formation. Again, that'll be one that we don't talk tons about, but we will mention a little bit. Chemical stability, acidity or basicity, so in other words, whether it's an acid or a base. Radioactivity. So those are kind of a list of ones that we'll look at. So remember, again, a chemical change must occur for a chemical property to be observed and measured. So you're not going to be able to see the chemical properties unless you observe it. So in other words, you're really not going to know that something is flammable unless you see that it is flammable, catches on fire. Okay, you're not going to be able to actually observe it is what we're talking about. You may know that it's flammable, but you won't be able to observe it. For example, iron oxidizes and becomes rust. Rusting is not a property that can be described based on an analysis of a pure element. So in other words, again, just because we know it's iron, we can't know that it is corrosive unless we observe it. Okay, so it had to be something that was observed. Uses of chemical properties, let's cover that real quick. Chemical properties are a great interest in material science, and you could actually take a full course on just material sciences. These characteristics help science classify samples, identify unknown materials, and purify substances. Knowing the properties helps chemists make predictions about the type of reactions to expect. Because chemical properties are not readily apparent, they are included in lab labels for the chemical containers. Again, I'll show you that. Hazard labels based on chemical properties should be affixed to containers, while full documentation should be maintained for easy reference. So an example on that here. At the beginning of the year, you learned all of the symbols that for our hazards and so forth. And we learned, flammability. We learned toxicity. We learned all those different labels. The reason we learn them is because they are on the bottles and we need to know what they mean. Also, for us as science teachers, we are required by federal law to keep, or OSHA, if you want to say that, we're required to keep sheets of paper on all of the different chemicals that we have back there that does tell us all the hazards and how to get rid of it and so forth. Those are called MSDS sheets. And here is just a quick chart that kind of sums up your chemical properties and kind of gives you an example of what they mean.